This episode is sponsored by Scotcoin, Scotland's first and only digital currency. It's peer-to-peer, always available, providing users with low to no fees. This is a crypto with a difference operating in the ethical space.
The organisation responsible for Scotcoin is a community interest company. This means they are dedicated to promoting positive change and a fairer Scotland. They incentivise and stimulate local trading initiatives, keep wealth locally, and grow the Scottish economy, encourage and support local businesses, and are an advocate for social enterprise and environmental causes.
Just to name a few. More about the ethical crypto, head over to scotcoin.com. Hello and welcome to the Whisky Sisters podcast. I am Inka Larissa.
And I am Jennifer Rose.
Together, we will be bringing you a weekly whiskey podcast where we'll be discovering drams, exploring distilleries, talking to industry experts, and sharing other whiskey adventures.
Not only will we be sticking our noses into our drams, but also into all things new and current in the whisky universe, with a leading commentary, of course.
You're listening to Whisky Sisters, the podcast.
In today's episode, we talk about our visits to Loch Lomond Distillery in Alexandria, which is pretty close to Glasgow. In fact, I actually worked beside there in Antarctic's Village many moons ago in the early 90s, so it was a bit of a blast from the past going back.
I think I know what you mean, the place. It's still open, isn't it?
Yeah, but you wouldn't think it was open. I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but it looked kind of like almost derelict from the outside.
I know, it did as well.
Because I was saying to Gary, who kindly took me down, I was like, oh, you never believe it, I used to work there. And he's like, it's still open. I was like, no way.
The stunning Loch Lomond is actually located very close to the distillery, yet not close enough to enjoy the views. And it is a bit of an industrial site, isn't it? Where you go to the distillery.
It's quite industrial, but as you say, you're so close to the beautiful landscapes.
So close, but you just don't see much of it, unfortunately. And confusingly enough, Loch Lomond Distillery is actually a Highland distillery, as Loch Lomond crosses the Highland Boundary Fault, which is considered the boundary between the lowlands and the highlands.
That's pretty cool, isn't it? I didn't know that, until this episode. But Loch Lomond is probably Scotland's most versatile distillery in terms of the number of different styles of whisky produced for different purposes on one site. We will sample 3 of the distillery's core releases in this episode. But before we go any further, let's stick our noses into that latest whisky news, people.
Stick your nose in it.
So one of our recent episodes, we had a guest from Waterford Distillery, Angelita, who is the terroir specialist, and she hinted something about a new release made with a rare barley variety from a bygone era.
So the Hunter is part of an absolutely wonderful project. We have a few other ones that will be coming up in the next year, so definitely be ones to be watching out for. The Hunter in particular, which is the first release of the Heritage. We are uncovering flavors that you wouldn't be able to access anymore because simply the grains are not grown anymore. So if you want to start to uncover forgotten flavors or things that we will never be able to taste because simply it's not there.
So it's now been released. The Heritage Hunter expression utilizes modern technology to identify historic flavors and bring them back to life for consumers of today. And the barley variety Hunter was named after pioneering plant breeder Dr. Herbert Dr. Herbert Hunter. It was introduced in 1959 and was, for almost 2 decades, noted for its distinctive flavor. However, until now, it had not been used in production since 1970s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty impressive. It took more than 8 years of leveraging lost breeding programs from the 1990s to discover the original flavors. Costing 3 times as much as regular barley, Hunter seeds were upscaled from only 50 grams into enough barley to produce 50 barrels from the first harvest. The whiskey has been matured in a combination of first fill and virgin American oak, French oak, and Vindu natural casks.
Oh.
It is said to present notes of dry soil, lemon sherbet, red apple skin, and chalk on the nose, and flavors of orange cake, dry savory spice, cloves, and wood char on the palate.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? As you say, we've had Angelita on and had, a bit of a hint that was coming. What do you think of the sound of that, Inka?
I think it sounds very interesting, and it really goes well with Waterford and what they are doing. It's not really surprising that they are trying to even bring back old grain varieties, because they are focusing on the barley so much. But yeah, it sounds interesting, and I'm sure there will be people like, oh yeah, it's another marketing gimmick, blah blah.
Yeah.
But I quite like it. I would be interested to try it for sure. Obviously it's hard to know. Like, you can compare it to the other whiskies, I guess. But yeah, I think it sounds exciting, and it's something new.
What I do like is the name Dr. Herbert Hunter. It just sounds
Yeah.
pretty cool. The
Yeah.
tasting notes, I'm not loving the sound of the tasting notes, but similarly to you, I'd be keen to give it a go.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It sounds a bit too dry and
Yeah, chalk on the nose. Oh, wood
Yeah.
char on the palate. But anyway, I'm sure it'll be right up many people's street, and it might be my favourite whiskey yet, who knows? Alex Jones, who hosts a variety of far-right media productions promoting conspiracy theories, is launching his own whiskey. It's a Kentucky straight bourbon and will hit stores in coming weeks, although it will be mostly sold online at $60 and above. It is said to be bottled in Shelbyville, which is home to a few distillers, notably Bullet, Jeptha Creed, and Rut and Strut Distillery. Oh, I think I sound a bit lispy when I say that, but Rut and Strut Distillery sounds pretty cool.
No, sounds a bit rock and roll. Like, I want to look it up now.
Yeah, me too. Oh, well, which does not appear to be currently active. Bullet, the largest of the three, is owned by Diageo. Jeptha Creed actually told Whiskey Raiders that they have nothing to do with it. I doubt Diageo would do anything for this guy either, but perhaps production has taken place elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would really come clean and say, yeah, we're supporting this crazy dude.
Yeah, well, it sounds like I'm super interested in this story, albeit a little bit confused. And I just think, what if the story itself's a conspiracy? Do you think it's just a big bluff?
It could be, but I kind of weird, like, why?
Yeah,
Why?
the earth's flat and, try my bourbon. If he wants to get in touch, I'd be a wee bit intimidated.
Yeah, it didn't seem like what I saw online. It didn't seem like too many people were that happy.
Did you see the label on Twitter?
Yeah, it looked pretty crappy, didn't it?
Yeah.
Like someone just printed it out on his own.
Yeah. I think it's just all a ruse. I don't think it's going to happen.
It could be. It's just like maybe maybe the guy just wanted more attraction to his page.
Maybe. And look, even the Whisky Sisters are talking about him. It worked.
Oh. Ooh. So, okay, there's been some other new releases as well. The Dalmore has created two new vintages, 2003 vintage and 2007. The 2003 bottling is bottled at 46.9% ABV, and it is said to have aromas of manuka honey, dark toffee, and aged vanilla pods. The palate offers honey, maple syrup, spiced dark fruits, finishing with English marmalade and sweet spice. Very on the sweet side, that one. Meanwhile, the 2007, bottled at 46.5% ABV, expression is set to deliver notes of honey, freshly baked brioche, and iced ginger cake on the nose, leading to orange blossom, honey, spices, and mandarins on the palate. Both are available now globally. Just in time for Christmas.
Exactly. Inka, as you like the Glasgow distillery tequila cask finished, will you be interested in trying the new Ian MacLeod Distiller's Smokehead Isla single malt, which was also finished in tequila casks?
Well, if you're offering, yes, please.
So the Smokehead tequila cask, Terminado is said to offer flavours of smoke mixed with chewy meringue, fresh blood orange, and barbecued pineapple. Tasting notes also include toffee, lime, and peaches, leading to a long, sweet finish with heat. Bottled at 43% ABV, the Scotch whisky is available to purchase exclusively via Amazon and smokehead.com.
That actually sounds, I love chewy meringue. It sounds really nice.
Yeah, I went through a phase many years ago. I was partially addicted to a chewy meringue. So even though I'm slightly intimidated at the thought of being terminated via smoke, the tasting notes sound good.
Whisky Sisters!
The first Loch Lomond Distillery site dates back to 1814, but unfortunately there aren't many records and the closing date is unknown. The current site was founded in 1965 by Little Distilling Company Limited, and like many distilleries throughout their journey, Loch Lomond fell silent in 1984, but resumed production a few years later in 1987 when I was born.
Such a good year for music and movies. I always say that. It was an amazing year.
And Little was the first and oldest licensed whisky distillery in Scotland. It got its license in 1772. But the Lowland Distillery closed in 1994 and the remaining site was destroyed by fire in 2004. Parts of the ruins can actually still be seen on the way to the Loch Lomond Distillery. Did you see that when you went to your visit?
Do you know, actually, no, I didn't actually. I was just thinking that. I didn't see the
it was
ruin.
more like it's rather than being the distillery, it's the house where the tax guy used to live.
I was too busy obsessing over Antarctic's village and getting flashbacks to wearing my big apron working in the coffee shop.
So today, Loch Lomond Group, the owner of Loch Lomond Distillery and Campbelltown-based Glen Scotia, is bringing out the remaining bottles of Little Mill whiskey. And Michael Henry, the master blender, has a tough job in blending together the final few casks while safeguarding the Little Mill heritage and creating whiskies that are in line with the silent distillery style. And the reason why I'm mentioning the links to Little Mill Distillery is because the unique distillation methods at Loch Lomond come from Little Mill, basically.
Yeah.
And Loch Lomond started their production using straight neck pot stills instead of the swan neck. The still has a straight neck with fixed rectifying blades. This type of still was created by Duncan Thomas at Little Mill Distillery in the 1950s. Actually, this type of still is only ever been used in two distilleries, the Little Mill and Loch Lomond. The still is often confused with Lomond still, which was invented in 1955, so around the same time, by a chemical engineer, Alistair Cunningham, to make it easier to create several styles of spirit in one distillery. In Lomond still, the plates 2 or 3 can be controlled, rotated, and moved to different positions to mimic a longer or shorter swan neck. When in the straight neck that they use at Loch Lomond, the plates, which they have 17, are fixed, so you can't move them around at all. And the latter is also taller and narrow.
They're very cool to look at, aren't they?
Yeah, it's just a lot to take in, I think, when you do the tour there, just because there's so many little technical facts, I think.
And so many differences from other distilleries.
Yeah.
At Loch Lomond, their straight neck pot stills can produce spirit up to 90% ABV, where a swan neck delivers at around 70% ABV. The range of alcohol strengths help in capturing different flavours throughout the distillation. Today, Loch Lomond has 3 pairs of straight neck pot stills, 2 traditional swan neck stills, 1 continuous malt still, and 2 pairs of continuous grain stills. Quite the operation. So their current annual capacity is 5 million litres for malt and 20 million litres for grain. Some have compared Loch Lomond's methods to a Japanese style of distillation, as they are bending the limits of the so-called traditional Scottish approach. For example, they produce whisky from 100% malted barley using the continuous still, also known as the coffee still, and because of the SWA, that's the Scottish Whisky Association, regulations, it has to be called grain whisky. And how amazing was their on-site cooperage.
Oh my God, I was so excited. Like even now, I'm like, I don't even know what to say. It's just really cool to see it in person, isn't it?
It's phenomenal. Like you're in the here and now present, but you're in like a time machine, and the craftsmanship and the skill is mind blowing.
I know, and they make it look so easy. But
Yeah.
I had the chance to meet up with the senior cooper, Andy Moore, who showed me the step-by-step process of the recharring. And a lot of the work was still done by hand, although they have some assistance now from this crazy machinery. But when he was churning the cask and moving it around and this heavy piece of wood, it just
Yeah.
looked so easy, like he's been doing it for so long.
Absolutely. It's almost like he can dance with it, just him and the cask doing that fluid movement.
Oh my God, yes.
And I was lucky enough to see the same with Andy when I was there, and just felt like so lucky to be able to have that insight. So yes, Loch Lomond has its own on-site cooperage where they repair, build and char their casks of all sizes. There are only 4 distilleries in Scotland that have their own cooperage. The Loch Lomond cooperage has been in operation since 1994. It is such a skillful job. It actually takes a person 4 badass years to shadow a senior cooper before they are allowed to work on their own and to fully take on that title of cooper. At the distillery, they repair around 20,000 barrels a year, and around the same number need recharring to revive the character of the wood before the refilling can take place. And if you want to check out our social media, we'll be posting some photographs and some videos and reels of this amazing process.
Yeah. So let's talk about the whiskies then. We've been talking about all this stills. So what do they do? As Jen mentioned previously, the distillery produces single grain whiskey, which is made using a continuous still, but the grain used is actually 100% malted barley. So it's basically the same stuff that you use for normal single malts, but because they use this kind of still, they are going to have to change it around a little bit. So they are the only distillery in Scotland to do this. It is not called single malt because of the Scots Whisky Association again have regulated whisky production in Scotland to only allow single malt to be made using a pot still. So it's called single grain instead.
I think that's a bit of a shame, but it is as it is, and I'm sure there's their reasons.
Basically same thing, but different type of still. Yeah, but I guess if it's not regulated, then it could just get really confusing. And I
Yeah.
guess it gives Loch Lomond a kind of unique product. I do think it's a little bit confusing for consumers.
Yeah, for sure.
So Loch Lomond produces 2 types of single grain whiskey, peated and non-peated, and it is the only distillery in the world to make a peated single grain whiskey, which is pretty cool and it's very nice actually.
Yeah.
These are both bottled at delicious 46% ABV. The peat is mellow because of the still style, creates a pleasant yet sweet smokiness, and the use of both first and refill bourbon casks adds soft creaminess to the whiskey. And both come at very reasonable price points from 28 to 30 pounds.
That's an ultra bargain. Love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Loch Lomond single malts are made using 2 different types of stills, the straight neck pot stills and the traditional swan neck pot stills. Obviously, these will both contribute to different flavours and levels of depth. Also, traditionally, the necks of malt stills are open, but at Loch Lomond, they have special distillation trays in the necks to allow greater contact with the cooling alcohol vapours. By using 2 types of stills, different cut points and peated and unpeated barley, the distillery is able to create 9 different single malt styles. I'll skip the 12-year-olds as we feature them in a minute, but let's chat about some of the other ones we sampled at the distillery. The 14 is labelled as spiced apple and soft smoke and bottled at 46% ABV. It is distilled using only the straight neck stills and aged in 3 types of American oak before being finished in French Limousin oak casks.
Yeah, it was really nice. What did you think of it?
Yeah, nice. In fairness, Inka, I'd had like so many gazillion new makes. And by the time I got to that, I was tipsy. I'm just going to call it.
I know.
I was just in a glow of you. I was in euphoric state. I'd seen the cooperage. I loved it, but I can't tell you much about it.
Oh my God, I love that you had the same experience because that was exactly how I felt. I was like trying all the new makes from different stills. It was amazing. They're really nice and fruity. Yeah, by the time I had like all the grains, 12-year-olds, the 14, but like I did enjoy I thought the use of the French oak
Yeah.
really there's some kind of elegance always about it. I don't know. Maybe it's just
Yeah.
like mental because you think French and but it was really nice. I really enjoyed the 14-year-old actually.
The name is cute and alluring at the same time.
We tried the Loch Lomond 18-year-old, which is also bottled at 46% ABV, and I found it quite nice. It had nice kind of oaky woody notes mixed with some fruity gooseberry and toffee apples, and the peat is well balanced and brings out the notes of dried tea and tobacco leaves. And yeah, it was definitely probably the most elegant of these, although I did find the 14 also kind of, I don't know if I'd say elegant, but there was some sort of
Classy vibes.
Yeah, definitely some kind of classy vibes there. Yeah, for sure. There are also several other releases from the original to 21 and 13-year-old single casks, and not to forget, obviously, the special bottlings for the open. And basically, there are a lot to discover from this distillery. Just so many whiskeys. So
Yeah.
they haven't won all these awards for nothing, and the whiskies are very good, yet still somehow underrated. That's kind of one of the reasons, really, that I wanted to really explore and understand what they do, because occasionally you see something on Instagram, but I think there's so much more to them.
And there's so much going on. Why doesn't the world know all about Loch Lomond? Tell me this.
I think there was something at one point, their whiskies weren't as good, or I've heard that they were a bit, people couldn't really get it, and maybe they weren't just as good. And now they really just started they started to produce some really awesome stuff, so people are finally noticing, but maybe they still might have the idea of the previous production that they think, everyone give it a try. So from the lineup you can find trade value bottlings as well, so that's always a nice thing when you have good whiskey at the reasonable price point. And they also release the occasional single cask bottles, which are worth keeping an eye out for.
Definitely.
The only thing I found disappointing, really, was the added caramel coloring, and most of the whiskies, especially with these 12-year-olds that we are sampling in a minute. Like, I can kind of understand that some of the key markets are in Asia, and they kind of require the added color to increase the sales. That's how they like their whiskey, just all the look, that kind of nice golden color. But I personally like to see the original hues of the whiskey and the impact of the cask.
Yes. I was a bit surprised when Gary told me that, but I was too busy enjoying myself to ask much more about it and any reasons behind it. So
yeah, it's mainly just for the marketing, and I guess because a big chunk of their sales come from markets outside of Scotland and in certain Asian countries. So that's the reason, basically.
Dram on fire.
So today we have 3 very similar yet very different drams, all 12 years old and aged in the same trio of casks. Let's start with perfectly balanced 46% ABV. That's quite a gallus name, isn't it? Like, perfectly balanced. Take that. I like it. It's kind of cocksure. Made using both straight and swan neck stills and matured in 3 types of American oak casks: bourbon, refill and recharge. This is said to represent the distillery's signature style, which is basically orchard fruits, vanilla and mild smoke. Let's see if we can detect those.
Okay, so let's see. Definitely sweet nose.
Inka, let's talk about the colour first. Sorry to interrupt you there, because we were talking about the added caramelly colour.
Yeah, so basically I think all these whiskies are
similar.
So it's basically the kind of caramelly color,
Caramelly honey colour, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. They all the same. It's a nice color, but I don't know. It just annoys me to look at them all and say, oh, they can't be the same. Obviously, they all had the same 3 casks, so maybe they would be quite similar.
Would be similar anyway. Yeah. Okay.
The nose is quite sweet. I was thinking apple crumble, made with oats and brown sugar and served with vanilla ice cream. There's definitely some sort of that, chewy toffee, that kind of one that sticks in your teeth when you chew it. And then after a while, I was getting fresh bread, when it's still kind of warm and you put loads and loads of butter, salted butter on the top, and it melts slightly on the bread.
Yum, don't be shy with the butter.
Yeah, so that's what I was getting. And also even more, I was starting to get the melted butter. When sometimes you're cooking something and you need to melt the butter in the pot and it has quite strong smell. Also in Finland, some people eat porridge with just a knob of butter.
Oh, butter in it, yeah.
Yeah, so again, it melts. It's just creates that kind of...
Yes, and it's got quite a distinct smell, actually, melted butter, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
How
I
about
love
you?
those notes. Okay, I'm getting some different notes because I'm nosing it now as we're chatting and it's been in the glass a bit longer. On my initial nosing, I got a kind of blossom honey, that honey sweetness. I actually got a raspberry kind of syrup, like a coulis that you'd maybe have with desserts. I also got grassy notes, like fresh grass. But I can absolutely get on board with your the toffee and vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I just stuck my nose in the glass as well. And I was thinking fresh raspberries, they can be super, super sweet as well.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. What did you get on the palate?
Not as much, I have to
Okay.
say. I thought it was quite spicy, oaky, kind of like a drying oat biscuit. It wasn't as sweet as you would expect from the nose.
On the palate, I got like a crystallized ginger, mild spice, a ginger cake, but not strong ginger flavors, but that kind of nice, soft ginger sponge, and maybe barbecued fruit. That sounds a bit vague, but I couldn't quite pinpoint if it was like charred pineapple or anything like that, but just kind of something slightly barbecued, but yet fruity.
Yeah, there's definitely some sort of fruity sweetness in there. Maybe, I don't know what it is, like a really ripe pear, or again, I don't know why I was thinking that agave, like I explained in previous episodes, sometimes that kind of really roasted agave that is kind of pineapple, kind of like a roasted pineapple, but maybe just something slightly different.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. I found it slightly ashy on the finish and kind of like bonfire embers, like an essence of sweetness, but I'm not sure what, but like a little bit kind of charred again and ashy.
Yeah, definitely. I think it does feel more ashy now. It was more oaky, but now it may be that kind of burnt oak. But it's not awfully smoky. It's just that kind of afterthought afterwards.
Yes, it's there, but it's not slapping you in the face.
Really, it's mainly more on the finish.
Do you find it perfectly balanced?
Maybe the nose more than the palate.
I quite like it. I find it kind of cute and accessible.
Yeah, it's definitely cute and accessible. That's a good way to put it, actually. So, okay, the next one is Inchmurrin, which is another 12-year-old bottled at 46% ABV, and the distillation was made using only the straight neck pot still. And it was also aged in the same 3 styles of American oak.
Inka, have you been to Inchmurrin, the little island within Loch Lomond before? You can get a little boat out to it and there's a restaurant and all that.
No,
It's quite cute. Let's do that one time you're in Scotland. It's good fun.
Yeah, sounds good.
What did you get in the nose for this one in Inchmurrin?
Yeah, I think this one was much more like a really ripe pear. It's quite sweet, but I was also getting dried cumin.
Oh, that's a bit of an exotic / sophisticated note.
Yeah, but do you think there's something once you get past the oaky sweet and the sweet fruit, there's some sort of, it's almost green.
Yes. Well, I'm being so aggressive in my yes there. Just I've got this sunny Scottish morning, but standing on wet grass.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a definite kind of fresh greenness.
Absolutely. I would even go as far as cannabis.
Oh, wow. Well, I've actually written on the nose daisy chains. Did you make them when you were a little girl in Finland?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
You know when you put your thumbnail through the daisy to make the daisy chain?
And it's kind of milky.
Yeah. I get that in the nose.
That is so true. Wow, that's the one. Maybe that's the one I was trying to... I knew that I felt like I knew this smell, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was.
See, we're back in those childhood daisy chain memories now. And I also get that
Wow.
sweetness of crunchy nut cornflakes, that kind of like,
Oh my God, that's a really good one as well. Totally makes sense. Oh my God, I need to write this down.
we're vibing
Yeah.
on the nose.
Oh, it was really funny because I did spend ages on this trying to figure out what is that. That's really cool, very unusual tasting note for sure. But I'm glad
Yeah.
it makes sense. So on the palate, this was definitely sweeter on the palate than the previous one. Must be the still. I was thinking like those vanilla puddings, kind of like a custardy type of puddings made with real vanilla. Some really juicy pears. There's oak, and I would say kind of nutmeggy dryness also.
Very nice. Yeah, I can totally hear you on all of those. I got a kind of tingling glow of ginger baking spice, a banana bread that's not banana-y, but that texture and consistency and that kind of mild natural sweetness, creaminess, like creamy chewed cashew nuts, unsalted ones. I know that last time I said the salted ones, but with the kind of salt like top. But this time I was getting that creamy cashew on the palate.
Definitely.
It went down very easily for me, actually.
Yes. I think on the palate, I preferred this one to the previous one.
Me too, by a country mile. I've actually written on the finish, blissfulness, cashew nut butter and oaky wood. I was loving the Inchmurrin.
See what this kind of unique still can just contribute to the whiskey.
Yeah.
So people should experiment and see and try, give it a go.
There's real alchemical, potent, like whiskey witchcraft going on at Loch Lomond, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. Oh my God, it was mind-blowing. Trying to take notes.
Yeah.
I wrote a whole blog post about it, and just like my mind was just
Yeah.
And then I was having all the whiskey, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to remember all this?
Totally. I thought, I'm glad Inka's also been, because my mind is blown. Plus, I don't retain things when I get excited.
But that's the thing, like, that's why I wanted to wait to us to do this episode till you've been, because it's just so hard to explain.
Yes.
Really, if you haven't been there, like, okay, you can try to explain it. And like our listeners now, if you are a bit confused about some of this stuff, I do recommend that you go and have a look at my blog post at On the Sauce Again, just because I put quite a lot of pictures there of the stills and the distillery. So it will just give you all the visuals that you will need.
Definitely. On the Sauce Again, check it out. I did actually mention to Gary, I don't think Inka's blog's out. And he went, Jen, yes, it is. I was like, oh. And he was saying how you'd totally smashed it and you'd got all the salient points and great information. So listeners, check out my pal's blog. I've not read it, but I will read it. But I was on the way home from that visit, Inka, I was actually thinking I really understood why you wanted me to have gone as well before we did this episode, because there is so much. It was such a unique distillery experience.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of makes it easier to talk about it and just to understand the flavors available, really. Last one.
Inchmoan.
What's Inchmoan? Is it one of those islands as well?
It maybe is. I don't even know.
Ah.
So Inchmoan 46% ABV is the smoky peated expression distilled using both still styles and aged in 3 styles of American oak. It is peated at 50 ppm. I'm just going to pour another wee bit here. Excuse any glugging noises.
I know, my suitcase was getting so heavy after that trip in Glasgow, so I only took tiny bits of the bottles, but just enough to sample again. Because I thought, there's no way I can remember all the tasting notes from the visit.
Indeed, good luck with that.
So, okay, I was getting a lot of ripe stone fruits. I didn't want to write down peach because I felt like it was something else, maybe apricot or plum or something like that. Then it was definitely a bit more smokier than the previous, with some pulled pork served with fruity chutney.
Oh, I love that. I want to come to your house for dinner. I think you have good combos.
Dried plums, but like, like big dried plums, but then when you put them in a sauce, my husband makes like a rabbit stew and things like that. So when it's cooked in something, like again, like a meat, but it's dried, but it's gone all like juicy and wet.
You guys sound really exotic. I do like to hear.
And then also, again, it's bringing me to the melted butter. So I was thinking really well toasted toast with butter that melts on top of it.
Very nice. Gosh. I was struggling a little bit on the nose with this one, to be honest. I had anticipated it to be a little more smoky on the nose than it was. I was getting kind of orchard fruits, not really sure exactly which ones. And I've got baked apple, then I'd crossed it out because it wasn't quite that baked apple smell. Pear drops, quite a strong, like boiled sweet flavour of pear. And I also have written river water on the nose.
Oh, in what sense?
So, you're at a body of water and it's kind of like it's not got a strong smell, but you're at water because you've got a fresh vibe in your nose.
Yeah. No, I do know what you mean. I was just wondering how you would explain it. Do you know, like when you walk somewhere, like you might not even see the water source yet, but you know it's there.
You know it's there. You feel the vibes. You can kind of like get the sort of fresh nature aromas. Thank you for joining me on that point, Inka.
Yeah. 50 ppm is quite heavily peated, but because the use of the straight neck still, it's much more fruitier, it's much softer. It really mellows the peatiness. And I think you get a little bit of the similar notes than you get on Inchmurrin because of the still. Like it kind of makes sense when you dry them in this order.
Definitely. And we haven't spoken about this before, but Inka, don't you think you could also taste the journey from the new makes right through?
Yes.
The final expressions, you could sort of sense it was part of that same family.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. I quite like noticing this. And definitely I think now it's been in my glass for a little bit. It is sweeter, but I'm still getting that toast and butter. Maybe even more so.
Nice.
But on the palate, there was subtle spiciness. A bit more of the smoke. I was thinking juicy, ripe mango. At some point, I was getting something that reminded me of almost like fresh paint, like on the finish, but like I don't mean it in a bad way, like sometimes like fresh painted, maybe a fence or something can smell quite nice.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got you. Oh, interesting. When I went in for the first sip, I really got the kind of charred sense of charredness even before I tasted it. So I've got a kind of char grill smokiness on the palate, a creamy kind of, like creamy smoky cheese, that little cheese that kind of looks like a sausage shape.
Oh my God, yes, I can get the smoky cheese. Amazing. I love cheese.
And like baked autumnally kind of orchard fruits on the palate. So yeah,
I love that autumnal orchard fruits and smoked cheese, creamy, because the smoked cheese is normally quite creamy as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely creamy smoky cheese.
Nice. Yeah, I like those.
On the finish, I got a little bit, well, I've written when I tasted it earlier, drying and ashy, but I'm finding it less drying now, and I'm finding a follow through of that creaminess, and I'm quite enjoying it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think definitely more creamy, more sweeter on the finish when it's been in the glass for a while. Definitely. Very nice. Calling it a peaty whiskey, it's not really that peaty.
For the peat curious like me, dive on into the Inchmoan. Don't be frightened. It will not slap you about and it will take you on a beautiful journey.
Exactly. And all these 3 bottles are priced around £45, which is
honestly
bargain.
Such a bargain. It tastes pricier than that, but yeah, brilliant price point.
Thing I also saw on some of these websites are doing little packages of all 3, like a miniatures of all 3. Oh my God, if you're new to Loch Lomond Distillery, get that pack and try them all side by side and just discover the similarities and the differences and just like all these flavors.
Definitely. I think it's really interesting to try them all together. I think that's a really good shout, Inka. So what's your winner out of these 3 bad boys?
The last one, Inchmoan.
Oh, very nice. I am Inchmurrin because it gave me that blissful vibe, but Inchmoan's a close second and perfectly balanced. Do you know what? It's not too shabby a third altogether. Enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, I would say Inchmoan, Inchmurrin, and then perfectly balanced. But the perfectly balanced does feel a little bit more entry-level whiskey to a really like a whiskey newbie.
Yeah,
I think the other ones maybe have a little bit more layers and just a bit more to discover.
for sure.
Whisky Sisters Whisky Fact.
As we mentioned the cooperage earlier, maybe you could explain why casks are toasted and charred in the first place.
Oak contains a lot of flavor compounds, but none of it would be absorbed into the maturing spirit if the cask wasn't first toasted. In addition, the level of toast will increase specific flavors. A gentle toast will add some nuttiness like vanilla and sweet notes, while heavier toast will contribute to more caramel toffee notes. So all casks are toasted, whether it is for wine or sherry or whiskey production. And when it comes to bourbon, the process continues with charring, which is one of the legal requirements for that style of whiskey. Charring does a number of things. It helps to further break down the structure of the oak, allowing easier and deeper penetration by the spirit and a more intense interaction with the flavors. And the cracks produced in the surface also increase the surface area available to the spirit, so it will go deeper into the pores. Charcoal layer also acts as a filtration system, helping to remove any unwanted flavors from the new make spirit. And charring also increases the level of vanillin, cacao-like flavors, and spiciness.
Completely fascinating.
Totally.
Yeah, also that recharring we experienced at the distillery will give more years for a already used barrel. They scrape the inside of the cask before recharring it. So it's amazing. It's like super environmentally friendly or sustainability friendly.
Yeah, of course, like there's, X number of years, I guess, what you get from a barrel. But it was really nice. Like, it was really interesting to see at the Loch Lomond how they used the machine to scrape all the inside.
Yeah.
And then like how he did the toasting with the big flame.
This episode was sponsored by Scottcoin.
Scotland's first and only digital currency.
To see how you can get involved, head over to their website, scottcoin.com, or go to their Instagram at scottcoin_official.
You've been listening to the Whisky Sisters podcast.
So thanks for listening. Please make sure to subscribe on your chosen podcast channel. And if you like what you hear, please feel free to recommend our wee podcast to all your friends, or at least few of them.
Yes, indeed. Please subscribe, because that is super important and helps other people find us in an ocean of podcasts. Next week, we will be talking about all things bourbon, rye and Tennessee whiskey. As we explain the difference between these categories, we are also sampling a rye whiskey. Oh, it makes me think of the Chris Stapleton song about Tennessee whiskey. Do you like Chris Stapleton or any country music, Inka?
It's not something I listen all the time, but if I hear certain songs, I might be kind of
smooth like Tennessee whiskey. I'll send you that song. Oh, I love all that. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at whiskysisters.podcast, Twitter at Whisky Sisters, and Facebook at Whisky Sisters Podcast.
Cool beans. See you next time, Jennifer.
And a wild crocodile.
Yeah.
May your glass be full and your dram on fire.